Building demolitions are feats of engineering that require precision, planning, and an unwavering commitment to safety. When executed flawlessly, they are awe-inspiring spectacles of human ingenuity. However, the stakes are enormous, and when things go awry, the consequences can be catastrophic, tragic, and at times, even absurd. Among the thousands of demolitions that have occurred worldwide, a handful stand out for their disastrous outcomes, whether due to human error, technical malfunctions, or unforeseeable circumstances. These failed demolitions leave behind chaos, lawsuits, and sometimes even enduring scars on the communities they impact. Here are 20 infamous examples of demolitions that went horribly wrong, each showcasing the potential for calamity when things don't go as planned. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. 1. The Sampoong Department Store Disaster, South Korea. The Sampoong Department Store in Seoul, South Korea was not meant to end in a demolition, but its collapse became one of the deadliest structural failures in modern history. The tragedy unfolded on June 29, 1995, when the building crumbled unexpectedly during normal business hours, killing over 500 people and injuring thousands. Although the collapse itself was not an intentional demolition, the catastrophic event serves as a cautionary tale of human negligence in structural engineering. The store had been poorly designed and constructed from the start. Originally intended to be a 4-story office building, the owners decided midway through construction to convert it into a 20-story department store, ignoring critical safety protocols. Load-bearing columns were compromised to make room for escalators, and substandard materials were used in construction. When structural engineers raised alarms about cracks and stress fractures in the building, their warnings were dismissed by management. On the day of the disaster, the roof, which had been modified to support air conditioning units far heavier than the structure could withstand, began to fail. The collapse started on the 5th floor and cascaded downward like a house of cards. Rescue efforts were monumental, but hampered by the sheer scale of destruction. What could have been averted with proper demolition and rebuilding turned into a harrowing lesson in greed and disregard for safety. 2. The Skyline Towers, Fiasco, Virginia, USA. In 1973, the ambitious Skyline Towers project in Bailey's Crossroads, Virginia, was set to be a crown jewel of modern architecture. Yet what should have been a routine controlled demolition of its construction framework turned into a disaster of monumental proportions. During the demolition phase of one of the uncompleted buildings, miscalculations in the use of explosives led to unintended structural failures, causing parts of the tower to collapse unpredictably and kill multiple workers on site. The demolition team underestimated the complexities of the building's reinforced concrete design, leading to an uneven distribution of force during the controlled explosion. As the charges detonated, parts of the building crumbled violently, sending debris flying across the site. Tragically, several construction workers who were operating nearby were struck by falling concrete slabs. The aftermath was a gruesome scene of twisted metal and rubble, exposing not just the perils of demolition, but also a lack of adequate safety precautions. Investigations revealed that the contractors failed to account for the building's unique architecture and underestimated the strength of its materials. The public backlash was immense, and the incident spurred sweeping reforms in demolition safety standards across the United States. Even decades later, the Skyline Towers fiasco is cited in engineering schools as a grim reminder of what can happen when precision is replaced by haste. 3. The Hudson Building Implosion, Texas, USA. The Hudson Building, located in Denton, Texas, was slated for demolition in 2019 to make way for a new commercial development. The event was supposed to be a textbook implosion, executed by a renowned demolition firm with years of experience. What transpired instead was an embarrassment of epic proportions that turned the demolition into a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. The implosion began as planned, with charges detonating to weaken the building's core. But instead of collapsing into its footprint as intended, the structure stubbornly refused to fall. The building leaned precariously to one side and froze in a lopsided position, earning it the nickname the Leaning Tower of Texas. Spectators, many of whom had gathered to witness the implosion, burst into laughter and disbelief as the partially destroyed building stood defiantly against gravity. The demolition company scrambled to find a solution. Over the next several days, attempts were made to bring the leaning structure down using heavy machinery and additional charges. These efforts not only delayed construction on the site, but also racked up considerable costs and subjected the company to public ridicule. Though no one was injured in the botched implosion, the Hudson Building debacle remains a testament to the unpredictable nature of demolitions and the challenges of working with stubborn structures. 4. The Pontchartrain Hotel Incident, Detroit, USA. In 1996, Detroit's Pontchartrain Hotel was set for a controlled demolition to make way for redevelopment in the downtown area. The event attracted attention from media outlets and locals eager to witness the spectacle. However, the demolition turned into a disaster that not only damaged surrounding structures but also became a nightmare for city officials and the demolition crew. As the charges detonated, it became immediately clear that something had gone horribly wrong. Instead of collapsing inward as intended, the building toppled sideways, sending massive debris hurtling toward neighboring properties. The surrounding area, which included parking lots and commercial buildings, sustained significant damage. Windows were shattered, vehicles were crushed, and the cleanup effort took months to complete. Investigations revealed that the building had not been properly prepped for demolition. Key structural elements that should have been removed beforehand remained intact, causing the explosives to push the structure horizontally rather than collapsing it vertically. The incident led to lawsuits from property owners and a tarnished reputation for the demolition firm responsible. For years afterward, the mishap was a sore point for Detroit's redevelopment efforts, highlighting the importance of meticulous planning and controlled demolitions. 5. The Glasgow Tower Disaster, Scotland. One of the most infamous demolitions in European history occurred in Glasgow, Scotland in 2013. The Glasgow Tower, an aging high-rise, had become a symbol of urban decay in the city and was slated for demolition to make room for modern housing. The implosion was highly anticipated, with a crowd of onlookers gathered to witness the dramatic conclusion to the tower's existence. What they saw instead was a demolition that spiraled into chaos. The initial explosion was underwhelming, with only parts of the building's lower floors succumbing to the charges. As smoke and dust cleared, the tower remained stubbornly upright, albeit heavily damaged and teetering precariously. The situation quickly became dangerous as loose debris began to fall unpredictably, posing a risk to onlookers and nearby buildings. Emergency services were called in to evacuate the area and secure the site, but the tower's precarious state made the cleanup process highly dangerous. Over the next several days, engineers worked around the clock to stabilize the structure and devise a plan for its safe removal. The botched demolition not only delayed redevelopment plans, but also cost the city millions in emergency response efforts and reputational damage. The Glasgow Tower disaster underscored the sheer unpredictability of demolitions and the potential for small missteps to cascade into full-scale disasters. 6. The Royal Canberra Hospital Demolition, Australia. What should have been a routine demolition turned into a tragic disaster in 1997 during the implosion of the Royal Canberra Hospital in Canberra, Australia. The building was being demolished to make way for a new national museum, and the city organized the event as a public spectacle. Thousands of residents gathered around Lake Burley Griffin to watch the implosion, which was advertised as a once-in-a-lifetime event. Unfortunately, what unfolded was anything but celebratory. When the explosives detonated, the demolition went terribly wrong. Rather than collapsing inward as planned, chunks of heavy debris were hurled outward at high velocity. Tragically, a large steel fragment struck a spectator, 12-year-old Katie Bender, who had been watching with her family. She was killed instantly, sending shockwaves through the crowd and plunging the event into chaos. An inquiry later revealed several critical errors. The explosives used were more powerful than necessary, and insufficient precautions had been taken to ensure the safety of spectators. The tragedy left Canberra reeling and raised serious questions about the judgment of officials who organized the event. The botched demolition remains one of Australia's most infamous engineering disasters and serves as a grim warning about the dangers of treating such operations as public entertainment. 7. The Ocean Tower Implosion, Texas, USA. The Ocean Tower in South Padre Island, Texas, was once envisioned as a luxurious residential condominium. However, the project was plagued by issues from the start. Built on unstable ground, the structure began sinking during construction, with cracks forming in its foundation and lower floors. Unable to salvage the tower, developers decided to demolish it in 2009, a rare case of a building being imploded before it was even completed. What followed was a demolition fraught with complications. The initial implosion failed to bring down the entire building, leaving large sections still standing and partially collapsed. The awkward remnants of the structure made the cleanup process hazardous and prolonged. Additionally, the sinking land created uneven pressure during the implosion, causing parts of the debris to fall unpredictably, endangering workers on site. The incident became a cautionary tale about building on unsuitable terrain. Beyond the failed demolition itself, the Ocean Tower's history as the Leaning Tower of South Padre Island remains a potent symbol of poor planning and the destructive consequences of ignoring geological realities. 8. The Seville Fairground Disaster, Spain. In 2001, the city of Seville, Spain, prepared for the demolition of a massive exhibition pavilion on its fairgrounds. The pavilion had been constructed for Expo 92, but years of neglect had rendered it unsafe and obsolete. The plan was to demolish the structure using controlled explosives, with engineers assuring the public that the process would be swift, safe, and efficient. What followed was anything but. When the charges were detonated, only part of the building collapsed. The remaining sections, weakened but still standing, posed an enormous danger to workers and nearby structures. To make matters worse, heavy winds picked up during the operation, sending debris flying into the air and damaging nearby vehicles and infrastructure. The demolition firm scrambled to contain the fallout, but the lingering hazards made it impossible to complete the process quickly. The botched demolition caused significant delays to redevelopment plans and left the site in a state of disrepair for months. Media coverage of the incident highlighted not only the technical failures, but also the lack of contingency planning. The Seville Fairground disaster became a textbook case of how demolitions can go awry when natural forces and human error collide. 9. The Antenna Tower Collapse, Missouri, USA. In 1982, a 300-foot antenna tower near Cape Girardeau, Missouri, was scheduled for dismantling. Rather than using explosives, engineers opted for a controlled collapse using hydraulic jacks to lower the structure safely to the ground. The tower, one of the tallest in the United States, was no longer in use and had become a safety hazard due to its aging infrastructure. However, what should have been a carefully orchestrated operation ended in disaster. During the collapse, one of the hydraulic jacks failed unexpectedly, causing the tower to tip at an angle rather than falling vertically. The massive structure buckled under its own weight and crashed into an adjacent field. Tragically, the accident claimed the lives of 4 workers, who were struck by falling debris as they attempted to flee the scene. The collapse was later attributed to a combination of equipment failure and poor structural analysis. Investigators determined that the tower's age and material fatigue had not been adequately accounted for in the planning process. The antenna tower collapse remains one of the deadliest demolition-related incidents in U.S. history, and a sobering example of the dangers inherent in taking shortcuts during complex dismantling operations. 10. The Red Road Flats Implosion. Scotland, Glasgow's infamous Red Road Flats were a set of high-rise housing blocks that became symbols of urban blight over the decades. In 2015, after years of debate, city officials decided to demolish 6 of the 8 remaining towers as part of a regeneration effort. The demolition was highly publicized, with officials promising a historic moment for the city. What they delivered instead was chaos and embarrassment. The plan was for all 6 towers to be brought down simultaneously using explosives. However, when the charges were detonated, only 4 of the towers collapsed as intended. The other 2 remained partially standing, with one precariously leaning to one side and threatening to topple unpredictably. Engineers and demolition crews scrambled to secure the area, but the half-destroyed towers became a serious safety risk. The incident caused widespread outrage, as the botched implosion forced nearby residents to remain evacuated for several days while crews worked to stabilize the site. The additional work not only delayed the redevelopment project, but also cost millions in unplanned expenses. For Glasgow, the Red Road Flats demolition became a source of ridicule, and a reminder that even the most meticulously planned implosions can fail spectacularly. 11. The Trump Plaza Hotel Implosion, Atlantic City, USA. In February 2021, the long-abandoned Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey, was finally scheduled for demolition. The structure had been an eyesore on the city's skyline for years, and its implosion was eagerly anticipated. However, what was expected to be a clean and dramatic implosion turned into a logistical nightmare. As the explosives were detonated, the structure began to collapse as planned, but large portions of debris were sent hurtling in all directions. Chunks of concrete smashed into neighboring properties, including the city's boardwalk, causing significant damage to local infrastructure. Furthermore, the dust cloud that erupted from the implosion was far larger than anticipated, blanketing nearby streets and homes with a thick layer of debris. City officials were forced to halt cleanup efforts for several days due to the scale of the fallout. Residents complained about the environmental hazards posed by the dust, and business owners suffered losses from the damage and delays. The demolition, which was supposed to mark a fresh start for the area, became yet another headache for Atlantic City, with some questioning whether the rush to demolish the structure compromised safety measures. 12. The Riverside Hotel collapse, Reno, USA. The Riverside Hotel in Reno, Nevada, was slated for demolition in 1953 to make room for modern development. However, the attempt to bring the building down turned into an event fraught with mishaps. The demolition crew planned to use a carefully calculated series of explosions to topple the structure inward, minimizing damage to nearby buildings. Instead, the implosion caused the building to collapse outward, sending debris cascading into the street. The most alarming aspect of the disaster was the proximity of spectators, many of whom had gathered to watch the demolition up close. As chunks of concrete and steel rained down, panicked onlookers fled for safety. Several people were injured, though. Miraculously, no fatalities were reported. The incident highlighted the dangers of allowing public gatherings near active demolition sites. An investigation revealed that the placement of the explosives was uneven, causing an imbalance in the collapse. Additionally, the structural integrity of the building had been miscalculated, leading to an uncontrolled implosion. The Riverside Hotel disaster prompted new regulations requiring stricter crowd control and improved oversight of demolition plans. 13. The Marlborough House failure, Milwaukee, USA. The Marlborough House, a historic 11-story building in downtown Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was marked for demolition in 1993. The structure was considered obsolete and hazardous, and city officials opted for an implosion to clear the site for redevelopment. The demolition company hired for the job was experienced, but even the best-laid plans can go astray. When the charges were detonated, the building didn't collapse entirely. Instead, it leaned precariously to one side, partially crumbling while leaving large sections intact. The incomplete collapse posed a significant hazard to workers and nearby traffic. To make matters worse, the demolition caused underground gas lines to rupture, resulting in a dangerous leak that forced emergency evacuations of the surrounding area. It took weeks for crews to stabilize and fully demolish the remaining portions of the building, significantly delaying redevelopment efforts. The failure was attributed to misjudged calculations about the building's structural design, which had reinforced concrete sections that were not properly accounted for in the implosion plan. The Marlborough House debacle became a textbook example of how oversights in planning can lead to dangerous and costly outcomes. 14. The Deutsche Bank building debacle, New York City, USA. The Deutsche Bank building in Lower Manhattan became infamous following the September 11th attacks, as it was severely damaged by debris from the collapse of the Twin Towers. By 2007, the contaminated and structurally compromised building was slated for demolition. However, the demolition process turned into a years-long disaster due to a combination of bureaucratic mismanagement, safety failures, and unforeseen accidents. The demolition was being carried out floor by floor rather than by implosion due to the building's proximity to other structures. Progress was slow, but the real disaster struck in August 2007 when a fire broke out on the partially dismantled building. The blaze, fueled by improperly stored combustible materials, killed 2 firefighters and exposed systemic safety failures. The fire compounded an already fraught project as the demolition team faced allegations of negligence, inadequate safety protocols, and mismanagement. The cleanup and removal of the building took far longer than anticipated, and the site remained a grim reminder of the challenges associated with urban demolitions. The Deutsche Bank building case highlighted the risks of combining toxic materials, compromised structures, and poor oversight. 15. The Jain building collapse, Kolkata, India. In 2013, the Jain building in Kolkata, India, was slated for partial demolition due to structural instability caused by years of neglect. The plan was to dismantle the upper floors of the aging structure while leaving the lower levels intact for future renovation. However, the operation turned into a catastrophic failure that endangered hundreds of lives. As workers began chipping away at the upper sections of the building, the entire structure unexpectedly gave way. The collapse was sudden and uncontrolled, sending tons of debris into the busy streets below. Several pedestrians were injured, and nearby shops were severely damaged. Emergency responders struggled to clear the rubble, fearing further collapses as they worked. The disaster was traced to a lack of planning and engineering oversight. Contractors had failed to conduct proper structural assessments before beginning the work, and the tools used for dismantling were inadequate for the job. The Jain building collapse became a somber warning about the importance of detailed engineering assessments and the dangers of cutting corners in demolition projects. 16. The Capitol Theatre Collapse, Sydney, Australia. The Capitol Theatre in Sydney, Australia, had stood as a cultural landmark since the early 20th century, but by the 1980s, it had fallen into disrepair and was slated for demolition. The process began in 1982, but what was supposed to be a routine demolition quickly turned into a tragedy that shocked the city. The demolition team underestimated the structural peculiarities of the old building, which included unusually reinforced beams and an intricate steel framework. When they attempted to bring down the upper portions of the theater, the structure buckled unevenly. A large section of the building collapsed outward, crushing adjacent structures and sending rubble cascading into the street. The worst of the disaster came when 2 workers were caught under falling debris, losing their lives in the accident. Investigations revealed a lack of proper safety protocols and inadequate structural analysis prior to the demolition. The incident forced Sydney's authorities to tighten regulations surrounding historical building demolitions, ensuring better safety measures and engineering assessments in future projects. 17. The Fonte Nova Stadium, tragedy, Salvador, Brazil. In 2007, the Fonte Nova Stadium in Salvador, Brazil, was deemed unsafe and scheduled for partial demolition to allow for a major renovation ahead of the 2014 FIFA World Cup. The project was meant to modernize the structure while preserving its historical legacy. However, before the demolition officially began, the unstable structure caused a deadly and unintended collapse. As workers were preparing the site, a section of the stadium's upper seating area collapsed suddenly, sending tons of concrete and steel onto the workers below. 7 people lost their lives, and several more were critically injured. The incident stunned the nation and raised serious concerns about the safety standards governing stadium demolitions and renovations in Brazil. Further investigation revealed severe neglect in the structure's maintenance over the decades. The stadium's deteriorating condition had been underestimated, and no proper risk assessment was conducted before workers began their preparation. This tragedy forced Brazil to overhaul its demolition and construction safety standards, particularly for large public venues. 18. The Lakeland Courthouse Collapse, Florida, USA. In 1976, the old Lakeland Courthouse in Florida was marked for demolition after a new, modern facility was built to replace it. The demolition team was tasked with dismantling the 3-story building using controlled charges designed to bring it down in stages. However, the process quickly spiraled into chaos. The first round of explosives was detonated, but instead of collapsing inward, the building split unevenly. One section collapsed partially, leaving precarious overhangs of rubble. To make matters worse, the explosives had weakened the foundation, causing parts of the remaining structure to sag. Attempts to manually stabilize the building ended disastrously when a large portion of the facade gave way, injuring 3 workers. The courthouse collapse became a notorious example of the risks of using improper techniques on older, poorly documented buildings. Post-incident analysis revealed that the demolition crew lacked complete blueprints of the original structure, resulting in miscalculations about where to place charges. The disaster left the site unsafe for weeks, delaying redevelopment and incurring hefty additional costs. 19. The Toronto TD Bank Tower, Fire, Canada. The TD Bank Tower in Toronto was undergoing partial demolition in the early 1980s when an unexpected fire turned the site into a deadly inferno. While the demolition team worked on dismantling the building's upper floors, sparks from a cutting torch accidentally ignited flammable debris that had accumulated within the structure. The fire quickly spread, fueled by old wooden materials and insulation that had not been properly removed before demolition began. The building, which still had parts of its interior intact, acted as a chimney, funneling flames upward and endangering workers trapped on scaffolding. 2 lives were lost, and several others were severely injured in the blaze. The incident drew widespread criticism for the demolition company's failure to clear combustible materials from the site. Additionally, fire safety protocols were found to be virtually non-existent. The TD Bank Tower fire became a key turning point for Canada's construction and demolition industries, prompting stricter regulations around fire risk mitigation during similar projects. 20. The Lean Yak Building collapse, Singapore. The Lean Yak Building in Singapore was a 6-story structure that housed a popular hotel and other businesses. In 1986, it was discovered that the building had severe structural flaws due to illegal renovations carried out years earlier. Authorities deemed it unsafe and ordered its demolition. Unfortunately, the removal process turned into one of the deadliest building collapses in Singapore's history. As workers prepared the building for demolition, part of the structure collapsed prematurely. The collapse was so sudden that several workers and unsuspecting pedestrians were caught in the falling debris. A total of 33 people lost their lives and dozens more were injured. Emergency crews worked tirelessly to rescue survivors trapped beneath the rubble. The tragedy revealed a history of unauthorized modifications to the building, including the removal of load-bearing columns to make way for expanded floor space. The incident spurred Singapore to enforce stricter building codes and tighter oversight of demolitions, ensuring that no demolition work could proceed without thorough structural assessments. Building demolitions are among the most challenging and high-stakes endeavors in engineering and construction. When executed with precision, they serve as feats of modern ingenuity, clearing the way for progress and new beginnings. However, the 20 cases outlined reveal the potential for devastating outcomes when things go awry. Each of these incidents underscores the intricate interplay of human error, technical failures, and unforeseen circumstances that can turn a controlled demolition into a catastrophe. The tragedies in South Korea, Brazil, and Singapore highlight the lethal consequences of negligence and poor planning. In these cases, structural flaws were either ignored or underestimated, leading to collapses that claimed lives and devastated communities. The Sampung department store, Fonte Nova Stadium, and Lean Yak building disasters remind us that inadequate attention to detail can have deadly results, especially when structural instability is at play. Meanwhile, cases like the Hudson Building in Texas and the Red Road Flats in Scotland emphasize the unpredictability of demolition, even with meticulous preparation. These structures defied expectations, remaining partially upright or collapsing in unintended ways, creating dangerous and costly situations. They showcase the challenges of working with materials that may behave unpredictably under explosive forces. Environmental factors and safety oversights also played critical roles in many of these failures. The fires at the TD Bank Tower in Toronto and the Deutsche Bank building in New York illustrate how neglecting fire risks during demolition can lead to devastating consequences. Similarly, the Riverside Hotel in Reno and the Capitol Theatre in Sydney demonstrate the dangers of inadequate crowd control and poor safety protocols, resulting in injuries and tragic losses among workers and spectators. These 20 cases also highlight the importance of learning from failure. Each disaster spurred reforms, tightened safety standards, and improved demolition practices worldwide. While the incidents are reminders of human fallibility, they also serve as lessons in resilience and innovation. They emphasize the critical need for preparation, precision, and respect for the unpredictable forces at play when dismantling the structures that once shaped our cities. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on these demolition failures? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.